Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a short little knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Sencut Brazoria, which is a really nice budget design that is absolutely available right now. I'll link it right down below for you guys to check out. It comes in a few different configurations. Thanks so much to Sencut for sending this in. Thanks to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. There's a link for Patreon right down below, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. This is a pretty simple pocket knife. Not really a whole lot that's overcomplicated going on, so it really doesn't require that complex of a review. Sorry for that super cheesy pun. And that's why it's going to be pretty quick today. Let's get an overall measurement of the Brazoria. Coming in at about 7.9 inches. Overall blade length is coming in at about 3.5 inches on the dot, and then your cutting edge is coming in at just shy of 3.5 inches, about 3.35. How about a couple of size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2? You can see it's right about in between. I'd still call this a full-size knife. It's just not a big knife. Up against the Spyderco, let's just do a couple more. How about the Spyderco pair of 3, and then we'll do the bug out on top. This knife reminds me a lot of the bug out. It's just a little bit longer, right? So I think you get a general idea. How's the action? The action is actually fantastic. If you don't know who Sencut is, they are like essentially Civivi at this point. I mean, they all, it's Civivi and Sencut are both under WE knives. So if it looks like a Civivi, if it looks like it's copying a Civivi, they're the same company, right? So it's very similar to many of the Civivis that we're used to. The action is very, very good, especially considering, you know, the price point. It's not sloppy at all. It's the whole thing is very well made, and it just feels very smooth. The action, like the detent, is also very good. No double clutch or anything like that. And you can also use that little fuller to do the reverse flick. I don't know if it's super easy to get it to flick out this way. It's probably kind of unsafe, but you can definitely pinch open it with 2 fingers. Just really good. Let's do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco pair of 3. You can see it's really not all that thick. Length and height up against the PM2 and pair of 3. You can see here, this guy's about the same overall length as the Spyderco pair of 3, maybe a hair longer. Nowhere near as tall as either though. Definitely nowhere near as long as the PM2. Shouldn't be that difficult in the pocket. What are we looking at for materials? We're looking at, in this case, natural G10. We do have some steel liners that have been skeletonized for a little bit of weight reduction there. And then we have D2 steel for the blade. Blade stock thickness, I'm going to guess that that's probably something like 115 thousandths. It seems like that's kind of the zone that this company likes to go with. It's about the same as Civivi, right? In fact, you probably, yeah, it's 112 thousandths is what it's saying. You probably could have put a Civivi logo on this. Most people wouldn't have known the difference, and that's fine. And then your weight, I don't think we weighed it. Did we weigh it? No, I think I forgot to weigh it. Weight on this guy is coming in at 3.21 ounces, which means the ratios are great. The balance is also really good, considering that's right there, right in that primary choil where you want it to be. So that's good. Do we have anything else to do? Hardware check. Get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. The pivot is a T8, and the body screws are a T8. The pocket clip screws are going to be T6, but that's really not that big of a deal. This is pretty much no different than taking apart a Civivi knife. It's got the right size fasteners, in my opinion, and there's a minimal number of fasteners, so that's great. No big deal, right? Okay, meat and potatoes time. This is a super straightforward knife. You guys can probably guess how this review is gonna go. So if you don't need any more info, that's totally fine, but I'll go ahead and finish it out here. Ergonomics, they're pretty good, right? I mean, this is a nice, straightforward, very classic knife handle shape, right? Chamfered edges, got a little bit of zazz there. They put a little bit of, just a couple of lines in there just to give it something a little bit more than nothing. There's some peel ply texturing here. It's plenty comfortable. The only thing I'm feeling is the pocket clip, because, surprise, they use that same pocket clip that they're using on all of their Civivi knives and like all of their WE knives, right? Everything else is good. You can get a full 4-finger purchase on this guy, which is great. Very easy to disengage thanks to the show side scale being cut lower than the liner. So very easy to get in there and essentially disengage it from the side versus pushing it down and pinching your finger in like this. So that's really nice. I appreciate that. Kind of like the contrast of the black hardware with the jade here. It looks good, but that depends on what configuration you get. This blade has been bead blasted as far as I can tell, and that looks fine. I don't have a problem with that. It's D2. D2 steel is absolutely, completely, and totally appropriate at this price point. I don't have a problem with D2 at all. What I do have a problem with is that the range that they advertise, much like many companies, is kind of low on the low end. They advertise it at something like 59 to 60. That is like the absolute, 60 is the absolute minimum that D2 should be at. Honestly, D2, as far as I know, should be heat treated about the same as the optimal area for M390, which is between 61 and 63. Honestly, their range should be 60 to 62. 60 should be barely passable for D2, and optimally it should probably be something like 62, right? So, I don't know if it just cost them a little bit less to be like, yeah, well, it might end up at 59, right? That's not even at this price point. Got to get that heat treat a little bit higher so that we're getting it, where it needs to be. A few of you might end up with one that's actually hardened to 60, and that's barely passable, and it'll do essentially what you expect D2 to do. But to get the most out of it, it really should be a little bit higher. And this doesn't just go for Sencut; it goes for Civivi and any other company that's putting knives out in D2, or some of these steels that perform optimally at just a little bit higher. Not every steel needs to be in the low 60s to perform appropriately, but as far as the composition for D2 goes, this ingot and CPM D2, honestly, it really does need to be a little bit higher. So that would be really cool. The blade itself is fantastic, and where it lacks in potentially a lower than what's the word I'm looking for? Preferred heat treat, it'll make up for in just geometry. The geometry of the blade is going to allow this thing to slice and slice and slice. It's a nice clip point style blade, little bit of a flat, little bit of a swedge up here, nice puncture tip. The blade's been done well, it's been ground well, it's exceedingly sharp for a factory edge. Those of you who are well versed in the art of sharpening will definitely be able to get a sharper edge on it, but right out of the box, it's pretty freaking sharp, definitely. Nice sharpening choil there. I also I probably should mention, I do like the flipper tab. You can light switch it, you can push button it, right, whatever you want. The D10 is tuned correctly, and I really, even though I mentioned it already, I really appreciate the fact that they put that fuller in there. It's absolutely accessible. And wherever your hands land, whether they land closer to the pivot or closer to the tip of the blade, you're going to be able to get it to flick out the way that you want. It says Sencut right there and nothing on the other side except for D2. These knives are made in China. You probably could have guessed that, but if you didn't know, these are made in China. So there you go. Something else I think is pretty cool. These stops are actually garaged, meaning they're blade stops, so they're acting as the stop, but they're replacing the stop pin. So you have an additional point of contact. Instead of the blade just resting on top of a pin, you have a pin on each side or a lug on each side of the blade, and those rest on the scales. The nice thing about that is that you get that stability and that solidity of lockout while still being able to have a blade that will fall shut. So that's really, really nice. I appreciate that. Sometimes during twisting cuts or cuts where you're trying to get the blade to get back out of some dense, thick, sticky material, if you do twist a little bit, some of the pressure is mitigated away from the pivot and into the frame because of how that's set up. But if it does work that way, it's minimal. It's just kind of nice. I always appreciate seeing lugs on the blade. So there you go. We got a couple of standoffs back here. So just, typical sort of pillar construction. We have an extra pillar for the lanyard folks. So there you go. Don't worry, lanyard folks. You can definitely attach some kind of weird friggin' Witch King flail off the back of it or whatever you guys like to do. I don't know. I don't get lanyards, but, it's there. We have the signature B- pocket clip from Civivi, Wii, and Sencut. Great. It's okay. It just has way too much of a bill. Honestly, all they need to do is knock this bill down a little bit and it'll be pretty good. But as it sits, it's a bill that'll dig into your palm while you're using it. So you're going to notice it. Carry depth and functionality, like just general functionality and utility of the clip is good though. This thing will hold the knife in your pocket and it'll keep it at a nice depth, right? So it's good to go in that department. You can mount it for left-handed carry. Lefties, you're not going to have much of a problem with this, even though it is a right-handed liner lock. As you can see here, it's pretty easy for me to manipulate, even though I am a right-handed person. I can do the reverse flick, all of that, right? My left hand is not, it's not like I'm a special, like, oh, my left hand gets used for knife fidgeting all the time. Not really. It's just generically easy to manipulate with your left hand. Lock up completely and totally solid. There is no lock stick. There is no pivot lash. It is consistently smooth from open to close, close to open, whatever. The detent, nice and clicky like you'd expect, and the tip is centered on this guy. I have seen some Sencuts that are a bit off center. Don't freak out. You can easily center your blade. In fact, I've got a 1-minute short on how to do that, and it shouldn't be an issue on Sencut knives. What's the price on this thing? It's 45 bucks. This knife does pretty much everything correctly as far as a budget knife should go. I mean, here's the thing. We got a bajillion of these, and guess who makes them? Civivi. Civivi and Sencut have been making the same types of knives for so long, right? This is just another good example. But Sencut allows Civivi and we to continue to make these knives in the $40 to $50 territory while they take the Civivi line and step it up just a little bit and make stuff that people might, like about this, but they add little elements and make them a little bit better, and they can bump them up into that $60, $70, $80, or even $90 territory. And then we gets to stay in the ultra premium, right? $180 to $350 territory that they kind of like to hang out in. This knife does all that right. It still has that weird dragon face clip or goosebill clip that I don't like. And honestly, their range for D2 is low, as it has been. And you know what? Again, it's not just Sencut. There's a lot of companies that are just heat treating D2 too low. Get it higher or switch the steel out, something else that you can get into a different appropriate range, right? But you know what? For 45 bucks, which is what this is coming in at, it's still pretty good. The chance that you get one at 60 Rockwell and plus the geometry of the blade, geometry plays a huge role in how a blade's going to perform, right? So for the most part, you're going to get your money's worth out of this knife, and generally speaking, it is recommendable. For somebody who's just getting into the knife world or just getting going with pocket knives and you want to start out with something good, this is one of, well, truthfully, you've got hundreds and hundreds of choices at this point, but this is a good one to start out with. It's a good size as long as you can legally carry it, right? It's got that good flipper action, it's got that good geometry, and it's pretty easy to hang on to and use with gloves or barehanded or whatever, right? So generally speaking, it's recommendable. This isn't a, oh my gosh, my socks are completely and totally blown off, like amazing budget knife. There's definitely stuff out there that's just really, wow, QSP and Kubi, for example, are making things that will literally blow your socks off at this price point. But this Sencut Brazoria is pretty good. So if you like how it looks and you've got the money to spend, it's $45 well spent in my opinion. This will go on my recommended knives playlist, and it's also going to go on my cheap knives I like playlist, which I would recommend you check out if you're looking for a good budget knife. Like I said, this knife will be listed right down below so that you can check it out if you want to. Thanks again to Sencut for sending this in. They did send this to me for free, so it's mine to keep, and you guys know what I do with stuff like this generally. I like to give it away. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe, because I'm going to give this away on a live stream most likely here in the very near future. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.